Among its forests, seas, and plains, Europe's wilderness is home to some of the continent's rarest and most endangered species. This series takes you to its remotest corners to show you its incredible natural diversity. A majestic ancient bird which nests out of sight of its predators. The Capercaillie. In Sweden, its territory is secure, but in the Black Forest, eastern Germany, and Poland, it is fighting for survival. Will the Capercaillie be able to win the battle against the disappearance of its habitat? From the Nordic taiga to the southern Mediterranean woods, Europe's forests offer habitats and protection to many animals. One rare forest dweller has been a feature of our landscape for longer than almost any other bird. The cock is up before dawn. He proudly shows off his impressive plumage while his call echoes around the quiet forest. In spring, the birds come together in their courtship ritual. His call attracts a hen. Females are much smaller than the imposing cocks. Both sexes have a red spot above their eyes. This rose becomes especially pronounced during courtship. The Capercaillie is a member of the grouse family. Ancient animals, they have lived in our forests for thousands of years. Male Capercaillies can be as much as a meter tall, making them Europe's biggest fowl species. Their large eyeballs mean they have excellent eyesight to keep an eye out for predators. They live for up to 10 years. The landscape in Poland's Masuria region was formed in the last ice age. Lakes, rivers, and moors were created when the ice melted and are today surrounded by thick forest. And yet wild Capercaillies have died out here. A breeding program has been set up to reverse this. Deep in the forest, they are trying to save this species. 6 Capercaillie chicks live here. They are 3 weeks old. There is plenty to explore in their enclosure, but their main task at the moment is growing big and strong. Armin Kobus is in charge of the Capercaillie breeding program. He looks after them from the moment they hatch and gives them some additional feed. The breeding method here is unique in Europe. Capercaillies are captured in Sweden, and Armin gives their eggs to a domestic hen to rear as an adoptive mother. She has incubated these eggs and now cares for the youngsters.
From the very beginning, she looked after the chicks and communicated with them. We were worried that communication could be tricky because Capercaillies have their own language and domestic chickens another. But thankfully, it appears to be working well.
It is always a stressful process because the chicken does not always accept foreign eggs. So far, everything is going to plan. The little ones are learning from the mother hen.
The hen shows the chicks what they should eat, what it means to pick things out. That is the mother's role. Her lessons encourage them to eat on their own. She has already often shown them berries, the larch branches, the heather, and this mixture.
Chicks need especially nutritious food in the first weeks of their life. They eat a lot of protein-rich insects and larvae in this period. The chicks grow quickly. So quickly, in fact, that their plumage has to be constantly replaced. You can already spot the males by their much darker coloring. The chicks are used to Armin because he has been around since they were born.
I have been there the whole time from when they hatched. I've picked them up and tried to imitate the hen's call to communicate with them. Why have I done this? So that they get to know me and get used to the call. The time immediately after hatching is very important because the chicks remember their mother and they immediately start noticing everything about her. Most importantly, her calls and how she communicates with them.
The chicks do get kept at a safe distance. This is vital for their chances of survival later in life. These chicks in Poland are part of a German reintroduction project. As soon as they are big enough, they will be released into the very same area where Capercaillies went extinct. Niederlausitz, in the German state of Brandenburg. There were Capercaillies here until the 90s, but the lignite mining here destroyed their habitat. The forest was destroyed and the water table sank. Nature was pushed to the brink of survival. With the rewilding of the old mines, nature has come back to life and reclaimed its old territory. The reforested areas here have been converted into successful conservation areas for rare species like wolves, hoopoes, and all manners of insects and orchids. The Capercaillie reintroduction program has been running in the Niederlausitz Heidelandschaft Natural Park for over 10 years. Lars Thielman is the manager of the natural park. Every year he catches Capercaillies in Sweden in order to reintroduce them here. In order to be able to keep an eye on these shy birds, Lars needs to be able to read their tracks.
Here
we clearly have the feather of a cock. I would say it has been lost fairly recently. And here you can see the most characteristic element of grouses or capercaillies. There is a second downy feather stuck onto the quill of the feather. This mix of a dark gray with a lighter shade of gray looks from a distance or at a brief glance like an anthracite kind of color. What is interesting is that the cocks look so black when we see them, but in reality they have virtually no black feathers. If you look at the feathers closely, you see all kinds of colors. This is totally different to the hens, but the cocks still blend into their surroundings excellently.
Capercaillies owe their survival to their excellent camouflage. They eat and make their nests on the forest floor, and so depend on vegetation, which offers them good hiding places. Capercaillies are at the lower end of the food chain. They need to stay alert. If too many of them fall prey to other animals, they will go extinct. Lars wants to know how the Capercaillie population here is developing. He looks for feathers to use the DNA in them to work out its size. The richest pickings are in the places where they carry out their favorite activity, bathing in sand and dust.
This circle and this recess are formed, especially with hens, when they dig their breasts into the sand. And then they begin to go round in circles. Thanks to our motion detecting cameras, we know they can do this very fast. It only takes a few minutes, but it seems they really enjoy it. If we dig around in there to look for feathers, we notice the sand is very warm, so we can see how it might be pleasurable for them. This is a way for them to find comfort. It helps their well-being and their physical health. It is particularly popular during the time when they need to molt their feathers.
An intensive monitoring program runs concurrently with the reintroduction. Genetic material is located in the quill.
We need, and obviously would like, a population with a good amount of genetic diversity. Not too many birds which are closely related, as that raises the fitness of the total population.
Small populations are most at risk of dying out. Lars has to stop this happening. The forests which capercaillies depend on to survive are becoming rarer and rarer. They need a lot in their habitat to survive. The trees cannot be too densely packed, or not enough light reaches the forest floor. This light is needed to allow the vegetation on which capercaillies depend to thrive. They need plenty of blueberry and cranberry bushes, as they eat both their branches and fruit. Insects provide them extra protein. Cocks are solitary animals who only come together in groups for courtship. Hens live as families for part of the year when they raise their youngsters. The chicks hatch in June, and the chicks begin to leave the families at the beginning of winter. Capercaillies are so-called precocial birds. This means all the chicks hatch on the same day and almost immediately begin to explore their surroundings. Hens generally lay 7 to 9 eggs. The chicks begin communicating with each other and their mother while still in their eggs using a series of clicks. At birth, they weigh just 40 grams. In Germany, capercaillie habitats are rapidly disappearing. Agricultural and commercial forestry, as well as the increasing fragmentation of the landscape through things like roads, have meant that only a few small populations have survived. One of these is in the Black Forest, Germany's most expansive low mountain range. The landscape alternates between forest and farms and stretches along the French border for 160 kilometers. Even just a few hundred years ago, thousands of capercaillies lived here because of the contiguous or joined-up forest. Today, the Black Forest is a popular tourist destination in both summer and winter. Commercial forestry and climate change have altered the makeup of the forests here and their ecosystem. The capercaillie is a victim of this. Veronica Bronisch and Joy Koppes work for the local Forestry Commission's research and experimental team and want to try to save this rare bird.
We are in the southernmost part of the Black Forest near its biggest mountain, the Feldberg. It is around 1,490 meters tall. These are some of the highest altitudes around here, and capercaillies like it at higher altitudes.
Even at this altitude, the capercaillies find it very difficult to find well-suited habitats. The reduction in population size has been dramatic. Veronica and Joy are trying to find out why this might be.
By analyzing aerial images from both the past and today, we can see how thick the Black Forest is today and that it has got progressively darker. We have to do something to stop this development.
One reason for the darkness in the forests is commercial forestry. Nowadays, large areas are not cleared at once, but instead, individual trees are removed. This makes the forests more resilient to wind and weather damage, but means that natural clearings no longer develop. In order to make the forest lighter and better suited to the capercaillies, trees will have to be felled. Dry periods have led to many spruce trees dying at the hands of bark beetles. But if this is kept in check, it could have positive consequences for other species.
These birches here have been dead for a long time. We will leave them be because the beetles have long since moved on. The trees no longer pose a danger as places where the beetles can spread or reproduce. At the same time, they provide perfect conditions for other organisms like woodpeckers and insects which like dead wood, including some rare beetle species. And if they get a decent amount of sun, that is great for lots of insects because they need tanned dead wood like this. This means we can kill two birds with one stone. We create a clearing for the capercaillies and provide a source of tanned dead wood.
Scientists have been working on a holistic conservation strategy here for 10 years, Operation Capercaillie. These newly created clearings need to be in the right places and well linked so that the birds can make use of them. This means taking down some trees.
I am always a bit torn because I think this really is an old tree, and if we leave it, it could get very old and eventually fall of its own accord. On the other hand, it is important to think about economic factors. I think we can only do conservation sustainably and on a large scale when we also bear economic factors in mind.
It remains to be seen if their work is doing enough to have success. There is not much time left to save this ancient bird. Less dense forests are important to allow capercaillies to fly between the trees. They are not the most elegant pilots, but can cover huge distances in the air. 4 million of the total 5 million capercaillies in Europe live in Scandinavia. In the far north, there are still huge expanses of primordial forest. Sweden's taiga is peaceful, has plenty of space, and has a large selection of delicious berries. There are more than 300,000 elk here whose favorite food are the thin branches of young trees. This helps to develop brighter forests, which suit capercaillies well. Eric Ringaby has devoted his whole life to the capercaillie. Each summer, he carries out a kind of census. With his pointers, he can locate the birds.
They are going crazy. They want to be let off and go looking. They are very focused. They are not allowed to hunt elk or deer, just birds. So they are only interested in birds. They will run into the wind, so they pick up the scent of birds who have been running around on the ground. Then they will start searching, and at some point they will stand still.
Cleo and Castor are trained to find capercaillies. Eric's research looks at the capercaillie populations in different kinds of forests.
The forest here is around 50 years old. If you look up here, you can see they have been nibbling on the pine trees. They do this in the winter, too. There is a mixture of pine and fir trees here, which provides them with good protection. This is a very good bit of forest.
Capercaillies climb up into the branches every night to find a good tree to sleep in. In summer, they come back to the ground in the morning to look for food. This means the dogs can find them.
If the dog has found a bird on the ground, he will stand stock still. Then I see here how far away he is. 75 meters. I follow the arrow, but only walk until I can see the dog. After that, I crawl up, and the bird will fly up into the trees.
Sit.
Eric makes a note of every spot he finds a capercaillie to map their favorite places. Capercaillies are not under threat in Scandinavia. Their numbers fluctuate depending on the conditions around them. There is a long history of hunting in Sweden. Capercaillies are hunted alongside elk and bear, but only for a set season each year. Eric wants to use one of the many hunters' and fishermen's cabins to recuperate after his long walk.
This one is a year and a half old. You can tell the age by the thickness of the beak, how thick it is here. You measure here. 21 millimeters. So a year and a half. Every summer, this bit here is shed. It disappears in the summer, but is always replaced. It is a bit like if you bash your thumb and damage your nail, and your body grows a new one.
Eric has worked with capercaillies since he was a young man.
It started in 1976. I had capercaillie chicks for 10 years. I had them in here. And when I let them out, they ran into the woods, and I could see what they ate. I wrote it all down, and they came up to me here, and I put them in here. I did this for 10 years, every summer, so I know roughly how they tick.
Eric's decades of research have led to some important discoveries, especially about what chicks need and how likely they are to survive. There are no capercaillies left in the wild in Poland. Instead, large numbers of storks group together just after sunset. 25% of the world's stork population lives in Poland, and most of them are here in Masuria. In the breeding station, the chicks have a big day ahead of them. In order to boost their chances of surviving in the wild, a capercaillie needs to take over their upbringing. The teenagers and their mother need to move into a new enclosure. They don't yet suspect anything. Armin and his colleague Derek need to catch the chicks in order to transport them. No easy task.
They may stay calm or be stressed, which could lead to them panicking and trying to flee. We will see. With chicks that tolerate the presence of a human, it is not too difficult. But there can still be problems because birds don't like being touched and picked up. Their stress comes in waves, because once a bird has been captured, it immediately tells the others that something is up, and they all get stressed.
One of the biggest challenges in the breeding program is getting a fully grown wild capercaillie to accept the chicks. Armin has spent a lot of time in the last few weeks trying to wake the maternal instincts in a wild capercaillie. Will she look after the little ones?
She may not look after the chicks as though they were her own, but she will feel some responsibility for the group. This is how I try and get my human head around it. I suspect that she will look after the little ones a bit. The more important thing is that she shows them what to be afraid of and what is okay, and that they watch and learn from her.
Cautiously, they begin getting to know each other. The chicks still have a lot to learn. Expanding their range of calls will be critical. Some signal predators on the ground or in the air, and others communicate the correct way to take flight. In order to reduce their stress and to dial down the amount of contact they have with humans, Armin will now only observe the chicks from afar by using a camera installed in their enclosure. Everything has gone well. The hen has taken the chicks under her wing and is preparing them for a life out in the wild.
The main thing that will change is that they will start flying around and looking for food on their own. This is especially important in autumn when the families break down. By then, the chicks will have to be able to live independently. But they are constantly learning what this means. What it will largely mean to them is being reacquainted with the natural world. The good thing is, they have grown up in the forest, so are not afraid. Their adult life is beginning, and they will have to get used to freedom and the world.
The chicks are ready for the wild. Lars is making preparation for the youngsters to come to Lausitz. They will spend their first few days in an enclosure there, which has been carefully selected.
We try to see the landscape through Capercaillie eyes. We reckon this is a very good spot. You can see the blueberries everywhere, almost up to your knees, and there's plenty of fruit. We can also see that there are lots of insects here. The chicks will find plenty of caterpillars, spiders, etc. in this blueberry vegetation.
A chick's life is, however, not easy.
It is generally true to say that the chances a Capercaillie will grow up to its full size and grow old are very slim. The vast majority die while basically still an egg, when their nests are found on the ground and eaten. After that, the first weeks are pretty difficult for a Capercaillie chick.
An electric fence should help protect them in this first taste of freedom. Capercaillies also have their own self-defense mechanisms.
It seems to really be the case that a brooding hen can suppress or at least massively reduce her own scent. In terms of survival of the fittest, between those that want to hunt others and those that don't want to be found, this is a very interesting trait. But they are more often seen than smelt. Foxes and hawks see that a Capercaillie is there and either, in the case of the hawks, swoop down, or in the case of the foxes, creep up to catch it.
Lars has done everything he can to give the chicks a nice welcome in Germany. Capercaillies are found across cold northern regions. Like all grouse species, their feet are covered with feathers down to their claws. Their most important adaptation to the cold is, however, their diet. In the winter, they completely alter what they eat. Instead of feeding on leaves, berries, and buds, they move over to pine needles. In this difficult period, they need to conserve energy, so move as little as possible and spend most of their time in the trees. Their sharp beaks allow them to strip the needles off in one bite, so that they barely have to move while eating. In order to digest pine needles, Capercaillies have an appendix of 1.8 meters in length. Elongated toes between their claws help them to walk on the snow. They also have small feathers which cover their nostrils and protect their airways from the extreme cold. Winters in the Black Forest used to be cold and very snowy, but climate change has reduced their length and severity, which has had a knock-on effect on how trees grow. Joy and Veronica are checking how their new clearings are getting on. Creating more brightness is important, but so is the nutritional makeup of the soil, because at the moment, ferns, raspberries, and rowan bushes are growing better. Blueberries need acidic soil to survive and provide Capercaillies with food. Joy is looking for stool samples to see if there has been any activity here.
Here in this area between the clearing and the forest, we see evidence of the Capercaillies, and we can see that it was here in the summer. Great. We can see grass and seeds in it and small bits of stone, which the Capercaillies eat in order to help them digest their food.
Analyzing droppings like this not only shows that Capercaillie numbers have dropped in recent years, but also that they are less widely spread. This makes it all the more important to bring light into the forest so berry bushes can thrive and offer Capercaillies a good source of food. Veronica's research looks into whether other species of animals and insects also benefit from Capercaillie conservation.
Here we can see the results from our insect trap here. There's alcohol in it which conserves them and helps us to identify the species. Here we can see we have a lot of wild bee species.
Lots of insect species like butterflies and wild bees need sunny areas and flowering plants. Areas like this are rarely found in commercial forests.
On one hand, of course, we can say how many different species we have, how diverse it is here. But if we're talking about sources of food, for example, we also need to know what the biomass, the nutritional weight of these insects is.
Veronica has proved that the biomass of insects is much higher in the clearings than in bits of forest used for commercial logging. An excellent revelation for Capercaillie conservation. Everyone can do their bit in the protection of this rare species.
We obviously have to depend a lot on people's own decisions to respect things like conservation areas, that we don't just walk into them, and that in winter, skiers and snowshoe walkers are careful about where they go. These are the kinds of things that everyone can do.
Action needs to be taken now, and there is not much time.
I am optimistic that we can do this because we know what we have to do. And lots of people have put a lot into making sure we can conserve this species.
If conservation measures are implemented and stuck to, the Capercaillie can be saved. There is plenty of support for them in Poland, too. The chicks from the breeding program are going on a long journey today. Lars is here to pick up his charges in person. He checks they are okay and ready for their strenuous trip.
Of course, this is a special day. If you think about the fact we brought 15 eggs here in mid-May with no idea what would happen to them, and now we are here picking up these chicks and taking them back to our project, that really is special.
The German and Polish teams have been working together for many years. But it's a delicate process moving chicks around every time. Lars sees the birds for the very first time.
There was a young female eating here, but she ran to the back as soon as the door was opened. They are behaving exactly as we'd expect, disappearing into the bushes. This is what they absolutely must do in the wild, not just stand around and wait. Oh, but wow, very big.
Also schnell gewachsen.
Yes.
They grow fast.
Thank you.
Lars makes the conditions for their journey as comfortable as possible with some of their favorite branches. Each box will hold 2 chicks during the trip.
Because we've been doing this for a while, we know that when they are together in a box, the birds seem a bit more relaxed. We can probably all agree that a bit of company is good if you're in a less than ideal situation.
When darkness falls, Armin and Derek begin catching the chicks. They are most relaxed in the calm of the night, and so easier to catch. The team works quietly and carefully to avoid stressing the birds out. Done. Time to get going. The chicks need to be released as quickly as possible. Armin says his goodbyes.
Muszę się rozstać, bo już wiem o tym od dawna.
I knew this moment of separation would come.
Zadowolony. Jestem szczęśliwy z tego, że wszystko się udało.
But I am pleased that we have been able to bring them up for a while and to observe them.
Mieć u siebie, odchowywać, obserwować, a teraz
And I know that they are going to a good place, their new home.
do swojego domu już przyszłego. Jestem szczęśliwy. Thank you very much. Thank
It does not take long for the chicks to fall asleep. This makes the long car ride from Missouri to Lausitz go quickly. The chicks have a very set sleeping routine. They only wake up the next morning around 2 hours before dawn. Since dawn, Lars has heard dissatisfied noises from the crates. Are the chicks getting anxious? He needs to release them soon.
They don't realize that we only want to help, and they also don't know that they will be released from the crates. We are making sure that everything is okay for them as soon as possible. I think a big part of it is about them not knowing where the others are. They think, am I here alone? And they get reassurance from hearing the others.
Their acclimatization to their new home begins in the enclosure. It will give them a couple of days to get over the journey. There is forest as far as the eye can see in Sweden. Renewable energy is as important for the economy as the timber industry. The forests have plenty of space for wind parks and climate-neutral energy production. However, combining conservation and green energy has its challenges. Eric Ringaby's Capercaillie censuses are used to decide where new wind parks can be built.
We need to know where courtship takes place when building a wind park. You can't put up a windmill within a kilometer of a courtship spot if there are more than 6 Capercaillies there. There are 10 Capercaillies here, which means this should not have been built, but it went ahead anyway, as we did not know about this courtship location. This wind park has 5 different places where they court.
These courtship sites are used by all the cocks within a radius of 1.2 kilometers. Capercaillies are creatures of habit and so use the same spots every year. Courtship takes place in spring, but rising temperatures means it has begun happening earlier every year.
They need clearings like this with plenty of rocks and shade, but it can't be too exposed if they want to fight. If it is too dense, they can't see each other. The forest needs to have the perfect density. This is an ideal spot for them. They don't have to worry about anything else here.
Courtship begins in the trees. The cocks group together in them in the evening, and their song attracts hens to the area. The next morning, the real action begins on the ground. Brutal battle will decide who is dominant. There can only be one winner. Time for a break. Eric knows what resources he can use out here in the wild.
This is the kind of thing you learn when you spend whole days in the forest gasping for a coffee. If you need coffee, you need it. You get to know that old branches are really good and there is water everywhere. This means I don't have to lug a thermos flask around.
Eric has observed the Capercaillies in the forest for almost 50 years.
The best thing you can do for a large Capercaillie population is to look after the forest. There are plenty of tricks you can use, even if it is impossible to do them all. But the main thing is to not be so harsh that conservation suffers. These birds need cover to hide under. That's something you can do.
Sweden's forests provide Capercaillies with perfect conditions. But in order for this to remain the case, they need to be preserved and protected from damaging interventions. In Lausitz, the time has come. The chicks are finally going to be released into the wild. They have already gotten used to their new home.
Once we open the gate, we step back because the birds need to decide for themselves if this is the right moment to start exploring. Sometimes I think that the absence of humans is actually necessary for them to go out. And to be honest, it is not an experience we can share with them. The first steps into a new world. Our job is just to open the gate in the knowledge that it heralds a new era for them.
Life is about to get serious for these chicks. In the next few months, they will have to prove that they can survive in the battle against predators and can find food out in the wild. Building a stable Capercaillie population in Lausitz depends on them. Capercaillies have learned the art of survival. For thousands of years, they have adapted to the world around them by hiding in the forest. In Poland, Germany, and Sweden, a compromise between forestry, green energy, and conservation needs to be found to make space for these birds' needs, and in doing so, to protect their habitats in Central Europe.